Okay, we're in Perek Vav 15. In the previous Perek, we discussed, and we have been discussing up until now, we've been discussing all along, actually, the idea that there is a tzir in the oiros. In other words, as we mentioned many times, there's a disagreement between the Ramak and the Arizal as to the nature of the oir in the sefirot. The Ramak says that the oir in the sefirot is all the same oir, only that it takes upon its character, the character of the kli in which it's invested, in which it's clothed. Therefore, to use a marshal, water in a green kli looks green, water in a blue kli looks blue, etc., etc. But Arizal says no, that there is a tzir in the oir. The oir that is in the kli of chesed is the oir of chesed. It's not the oir of gvura. And the oir that's in the kli of gvura is the oir of gvura, not the oir of chesed. And we proved that through, in the last chapter, we proved that through the concept which is discussed in the Zohar called achlifu duchtayu. It's discussed in the Zohar and brought in Kabbalah and Arizal in particular. Achlifu duchtayu means that the light that chooses its place. In other words, we sometimes have a situation where the or of chesed goes into the kli of gvura, or vice versa. The or of gvura goes into the kli of chesed. If it would be like the Ramak said, there wouldn't be such a thing. You couldn't have the or of chesed in the kli of gvura. The or in the kli of gvura would be gvura, because it's the kli that gives the or its tziyur according to the Ramak. Says the Arizal, no, you see from achlifu duchtayu that it's not like that. That it's already an or of chesed even before it gets into the kli, and that's how it can be in a different kli. The or of chesed in the kli of gvura, for example. Okay, so that was the previous chapter. He now goes on to discuss a related subject, which resolves a number of other questions and disputes that there are regarding the sefirot, which has to do with the concept of the Eser Sfiros hagenuzot, the 10 hidden sefirot, which we'll discuss in this chapter. Okay. So, he says like this. Let me just share screen here so you can see where I'm holding. All right. Perek Vav, Vayesh Loimar, we could say Inyan, that this too is an Inyan of Eser Sfiros hagenuzot v'ma'atzilon. This is the Inyan of the 10 Sfiros hagenuzot, the Sfiros which are hidden b'ma'atzilon. That is the Loshen. The Eser Sfiros hagenuzot b'ma'atzilon. The 10 sefirot which are hidden in the ma'atzil, in the emanator, and we have to explain and understand what this means. But we'll see as he goes on and explains this concept. And what does it mean? These are the sefirot, the Eser Sfiros in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. So immediately we have a question. The question obviously arises regarding the idea of how could it be that there is Or Ein Sof lifnei hatzimtzum? I mean, there's sefirot in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. How could it be that there's sefirot in the Or Ein Sof? If you're saying that the sefirot are kelim, which is what the Ramak says, that the sefirot are the kelim, so then it doesn't make sense to say that there's sefirot in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Of course, the Ramak didn't have the whole inyan of Tzimtzum. He didn't discuss the Tzimtzum. He didn't understand that there was an inyan of Tzimtzum at all. That was a chiddush of the Arizal. But in any event, it cannot work according to the Ramak. You cannot have Eser Sfiros hagenuzot in the Or Ein Sof, in the Or Ein Sof. Impossible. Mashayin can, according to the Arizal, if the Eser Sfiros hagenuzot are the Eser Sfiros which are in the oir, then it's possible that we can have it in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, and this is what he's going to explain. That means to say, Shegam b'yos hakav kalul adayin ba'Or Ein Sof. While the kav is still in the Or Ein Sof. In other words, the Kav didn't yet emerge from the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, Shlifnei Tzimtzum. Here we're talking about the Kav in potential, before the Kav actually emerges from the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Then Shayach Boy, it's Shayach to have in the Kav, and again, what's the Kav? The Kav is the Inyan of Or, not the Inyan of Kalim. The Kalim come from the Rishimo, and the Or comes from the Kav. The Rishimo is what was left after the Tzimtzum. In other words, the Koch HaGvul that was in Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, that's the Rishimo. Masha'en Kain, the Kav, is the Shoresh HaOiros, and not the Shoresh HaKalim, at least according to the Arizal and according to the way we're understanding it over here. So we say that the Kav, which was in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, Shaykh Bo Eses V'Ris Agnuzos. We could say that in the Kav there's Eses V'Ris Agnuzos, even before the Kav actually emerges from the Or Ein Sof. And therefore, these Eses V'Ris Agnuzos, the hidden spheroids, are the Shoresh HaOiros. Those are the roots of the Or, not the roots of the Kalim. Now he goes on to present the Pardes' view, that's the Ramak. Pardes Kasov, She'eses Gnuzos and Shosha Kalim. According to the Pardes, it's not the Shoresh Or, but the Shoresh Kalim. Why? Because the Ors don't have any Hagbolas in them. The Or is all the same Or. Okay, so let's explain. If we would say Sha'oris the Esespherois, that the lights of the Esespherois, Hem bli mehus legamrei, or without any character, without any limitations, without any differentiation in them, bli mehus legamrei, k'mo Ein Sof shelamayla legamrei mehus Esespherois, like the Or Ein Sof itself before the Esespherois. If we're going to say that the Or in the spheroids, like the Ramak says, that the Or in the spheroids is Or Pashut, and there's no differentiation in the Or at all. Al Korchach, therefore, against your will, you must say Al Korchach Tzarech Loima. You have to say the Eses V'Ris Agnuzos and Shosha Kalim. You would have to say that Eses V'Ris Agnuzos are the root of the Kalim. You have a little bit of a problem then, because what's the Rishimo? Of course, the Ramak doesn't actually address the whole concept of the Rishimo, but what he would do with it is problematic. In any event, but according to what we wrote over here, that you can say even in the Or Ein Sof, even the Oris of the Esespheros, you have the possibility in the Or, you have the possibility of Chochma, Chesed, etc., etc., all the 10 spheres in the Or itself, and not just in the Kalim. Rak shenikra bli ma. Only what? That those Oras are still called bli ma l'gabei Kalim, the Esespheros. That regarding the Kalim, in comparison with the Kalim, these Oras are still in a state of bittul, of Or. The Or is in a state of bittul l'gabei the Kalim. In other words, the Kalim b'chinas yesh, and the Oras are b'chinas bittul, they're b'chinas bli ma. In other words, they don't have an identifiable mahus per se. They have a certain characteristic, a certain siyur, but they don't have an identifiable mahus completely, not like the kalim. In other words, compared with the kalim, they're ba'in aroch. Okay. If that's the case, then the esespheros which transcend, which are above the rishimo. Now again, what's the rishimo? After the tzimtzum, what was left in the halal was essentially the rishimo. What's the rishimo? The rishimo is the koach hagvul. The koach hagvul that was in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, and when the tzimtzum, the Or was nistalik, that left the koach hagvul, which becomes the shoresh hakelim. But we have to say, according to the Ramak, that the Rishimo doesn't have a function other than the Esespheros Agnuzos. Seems to be the same thing. If you even posit the concept of Rishimo by the Ramak. Just 1 second here. I forgot to put up the chat just in case there's questions. Here we go. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, again, we have to say that the Esespheros Agnuzos transcend the Rishimo. They're not the same thing as the Rishimo. And then the Shoresh HaOros of the Esespheros of Atzilus, as we just said. Okay. Well, the Or Ein Sof Atzmoi, but the Or Ein Sof itself, in other words, the Or Ein Sof L'mayla Miha Eses Tfiris HaGnuzois, Afilu ha'or v'hagilu min ha'atzmus shu b'chinas gilui ha'etzem, even the or which is called gilui ha'etzem. In other words, there's various madregas of or, as we know, right? There's the etzem ha'or, there is the or she'begilui la'atzmoi, and there's the or ha'shayach la'olemus. These are the three madregas in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum. In the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum. So where would the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot be? The Eses Sfiros hagenuzot would be in the Or Hashayach La'olamus, even before the Olamus are created. That is Or that has a relevance to the world that will emerge later, and that's why there's a tziyur in the Or, because the whole purpose of that Or of the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot is to be the shoresh of the Oiros in Kalim. It's the shoresh of the Or that will be in the Kalim, in the various Olamus later on. That's the Or of the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot, and that's the Or which is already begilui min ha'etzem. It's already begilui in a sense, right? It's the Or Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof Asmo. Even the Or which is begilui is gilui ha'etzem. Now the Or which is gilui ha'etzem is the second madrega of Or. There's etzem ha'or, which is not begilui, and then there's Or which is begilui la'atzmoi, the Or which is revealed only to himself, and then there's the Or HaShayach La'olamus. The Eses Sfiros hagenuzot will be in the Or HaShayach La'olamus, but even in the Or which is Shebegilu La'atzmoi, which is the second Madraga in the Or Ein Sof, it's not Shayach to speak about the Inyan of Sfiros, because it's only Begilu La'atzmoi, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And Kol Shekain in the Etzem Or, it's not Shayach, the Inyan of Sfiros at all. So again, אבל האור אין סוף עצמו, אפילו האור והגילוי מן העצמו, שהוא בכינס גילוי העצם, which is בגילוי לעצמו, הרי הוא מופשט לגמרי ממהות אסס ספירוס. It's completely stripped of the concept of Eses Sfiros. In other words, it's completely abstracted from that, and it's not shaykh there, the whole concept of Eses Sfiros. It's not shaykh to talk of Sfiros at all. When we talk about Sfiros in the Or Ein Sof, only in the Madrega, the third Madrega, the lowest Madrega of the Or Ein Sof, which is called Or HaShayach La'olamus, before they are even Olamus, before the Tzimtzum. Okay. Ve'eses Sfiros hagenuzot, tzarich liyos ve'eses Sfiros da'oros. Now, what's the scene in the bracket over here? When he says the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot, and he says tzarich liyos ve'eses Sfiros da'oros, this comes from a ha'ora in one of the Mamorim of the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Tzemach Tzedek uses this loshon over here, ve'eses Sfiros hagenuzot. And on that, the Rebbe Rashab says perhaps what he meant to say was the Eses Sfiros da'oros, because he doesn't distinguish over there between the Shita of the Arizal and the Shita of the Ramak. And what he wants to talk about is the Eses Sfiros in the oros, which is the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot, the way we're explaining it now. But it would work a little bit better in terms of understanding what the Tzemach Tzedek was talking about if we would have said Eses Sfiros da'oros. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing as the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot, the way we're explaining it now. It's called the Eses Sfiros of the oros. Hein nikroim bli ma u bli gvul legabe Eses Sfiros dekalim. These Eses Sfiros, which are the Eses Sfiros of the oros, the 10 madregas in the Or itself, which is shayach to Olamus, but didn't yet come out into the Olamus, into the kalim. These oros are called bli ma u bli gvul, compared with the Eses Sfiros of the Kalim. The Eses Sfiros of the Kalim are the Eses Sfiros which are mamish mugbalim. They have the gvul of the Inyan of Kli. In other words, the Inyan of Kli that came from the Rishimo. Here we're talking about the Eses Sfiros in the Oyer, the Eses Sfiros of the Kav. We're not talking about the Eses Sfiros of the Kalim, which came from the Rishimo, as he goes on to say, Hanikra blima u bligvul legabe Eses Sfiros the Kalim shene'etzlu mi'arishimo, that were emanated from the Rishimo. Okay, why is that? Ki ha'oiros ne'etzlu v'nimshechu me'or shelamale mi'arishimo, because these, the 10 spheres in the Or, as opposed to the spheres in the Kalim, came from a madrega which transcends the Rishimo. A madrega shemimeno nimshach hakav. Don't make a mistake. It's not that the kav is nimshach from the reshimo, right? The kav is a different inyan. The kav and the reshimo are two different inyanim. The oiro is nezlu nimshach or shelamal mehareshimo, and it's that or that we're talking about, which is mishemimeno nimshach hakav. Don't think that it's mimeno nimshach hakav mihareshimo. It's not. Okay, let's continue. But as regards Oren Sof Atzmoy, in other words, Hayim Madreg is in Oren Sof, or Shebegilu Atzmoy, or Etzema, or, and Gamken Shorish Makor Agvul. These would be called also, these Esesvidus Hagenuzois, these Oirois in the Kav would also be called Makor Hagvul. Why would they be called Makor Hagvul? They're called Makor Hagvul because they're in the Or HaShayach LaOilemis, and there is a certain Agbola of Chesed, Gvuri, Tiferes, and so on and so forth in the Oir itself of the Kav. And a move on. So according to this, we can explain something that is, at first glance, difficult to understand, if not impossible. The Bezayah Be'idra Nire, that it appears in the Zohar, and the Idra is one of the sections of the Zohar, and one of the more abstruse and difficult mystical sections of the Zohar. There's the Idra Rabbah and the Idra Zuta. So in the Idra, in both of the Idros are, Idra really means a room, a chamber. So the Idra Rabbah is the great chamber, and the Idra Zuta, the small chamber. These were two sort of verbringings, you could say, I suppose, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had with his Talmidim in the Zohar. He revealed to them many, many secrets in these two Idros. There's a question about something that it says in the Idra. What does it say over there? Sha'atik hu mamash muhusa v'atzmusa. It says that Atik is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atik is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so what's the difficulty? If that's the case, we'll have a question. Madua Arizal Omar, why would the Arizal say that there's a number of madrigas that transcend Atik, higher than Atik? If there's madrigas higher than Atik, and Atik is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are you telling me that there's madrigas higher than HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Chas v'sholom to say such a thing. What does Arizal mean? And he gives examples of the various madrigas that the Arizal talks about that are higher than Atik. Come on, Adam Kadmoin, Va'akudim, the level of Adam Kadmoin, the fifth world, the highest of the worlds, the world that's koil all of the world, the world that includes within it all of the other worlds. And Akudim is the concept of 10 oiros bekli echad, which I think it was in chapter 12 or 13, that he said over there, that's another proof that there's hakbolas in the or even before the kli, because in Akudim you have one kli only, and yet you have 10 oiros, Akudim bekli echad, 10 oiros in one kli. We explained that previously, but in any event, you have madrigas that seem to be lamal mi'atik, akva, Akudim, that transcend the level of Atzilus, the level of Atik of Atzilus. So how can you talk about madrigas if you're going to say that Atik is the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Atzmuso and Muhuso and Mamish. As he says, Muhuso v'Atzmuso, okay. That's what Atik is, Muhuso v'Atzmuso. How can you have madrigas higher than Atzmuso? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, even though sheyesh l'taretz, you could answer it in another way. Leyesh l'taretz zois, you can answer it as follows: Shahari Arizal, the Arizal himself, oimer sheyesh gam k'b'chinas atik l'mal mi'ak, that is a madrega of atik which transcends ak itself. So maybe you could say that when it's talking about atik, that's muhusav atzmusoi, that's talking about the madrega of atik, that's l'mal mi'ak. Now, what's Atik? Atik generally is the inyan of Pnimius HaKeser. As you probably know by now, in Keser you have three madrigas. The lowest madriga of Keser is called Arich Anpin. Then you have Atik Yoimi, you have Atik, And then the highest madrega of Keser is called Radla, Reisha de lo Ityada, Reisha de lo Isyada. The beginning that cannot be known, right? The highest madrega of Keser is completely hidden from us. We have no idea. But Atik, at least we have some idea, even though the word Atik itself, usually translated as ancient, but it means ne'etak, something that's outside of our experience. It's distant from us. It's ne'etak. It's withdrawn from our capabilities of understanding in general. But nevertheless, the Nevi'im talk about, Cheskel talks about the union of Atik Yoimin. Now, just to be a little bit clearer, the Inyan of Atik, which is the middle madrega in Keser, even though it's called Pnimius Keser, it's the middle madrega, the highest madrega is called Radla, but Atik in itself has two madregas. There's the madrega of Atik Yoimin, which is lower madrega in Atik, and it's called Atik Yoimin because there are 6 days, right, which is, in other words, Zer Anpin of Atik, and together with Malchus, it will be the 7 days of creation, so to speak, the 7 days of Atik. In other words, that's why it's called Atik Yoimin, the ancient of days. The Indian of days is the Indian of the 7 madregas of Atik, primarily 6 madregas, but Malchus is also included. So you would say 7. So the 7 madregas of Atik, that's the lower Paratzuf in Atik, the lower madrega in Atik. And then you have what's called Atika Kadisha. Atika Kadisha is the Chabad of Atik, or the Kachab. That's why it's usually explained, the Kesach Chochma Bina of Atik, right? The Moichin of Atik, or Atika Kadisha. Okay, so again, the Arizal says, so you could perhaps answer this question if you're going to say that Atik it's Atzmus. How could the Arizal say that? So you could answer that he's talking there about Atik, which the Zohar, when it mentions that Atik is Atzmus Muhusoi, it's talking about the Madreg of Atik that transcends Adam Kadmon. That's Lamalami Adam Kadmon. In other words, there's a Keser of Adam Kadmon as well. And the Keser of Adam Kadmon would be called Atik. The Pnimis Keser of Adam Kadmon would be called Atik. And that's shaykh to say that Atzmus Muhusoi. Beyond transcending the skull, so to speak, of Adam Kadmon, there is something that's like Atik Atzilus, only it's Atik of Ak. Because there's an Atik in Atzilus, we have to posit that there's an Atik in Ak as well. Even though, of course, Ayin lo ra'asa Elokim zulasecha, nobody saw it except HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it is mentioned in the Zohar, it's mentioned in the Kitzvah Arizal. So obviously they had an inkling of what this is about, that they got from Eliyahu Hanavi or one of the Neshomas, Saba, and so on, who revealed lots of secrets. In any event, there is such a concept. Hare gam atik da'ak hu nimshach mi'akav. Nevertheless, even the Atik of Ak, although Ak is the highest world, the world that includes all worlds, the transcendent world, the world of worlds, so to speak, hu nimshach mi'akav is also from the Kav. Not only from the Kav, as it is, not from the Kav as it is before the Tzimtzum, but from the Kav as it is after the Tzimtzum. The first Hamshocha of the Kav into the Halal. What happens when the Kav, after the Tzimtzum leaves a Halal, a void, and into that void comes the Or HaKav, the light of the Kav, right? And the Kav, when the light of the Kav comes into the Halal, into the void, into the Makom Panoi, the first thing it does is it circles around the perimeter, the inner perimeter of the Halal. It circles around once, it circles around twice, it circles around 3 times, and so on and so forth, 4 times, 5 times, until it makes the sefirot of Ak. Those would be the sefirot of Igulim of Ak. And then there's a Yosher of Ak, we'll discuss that in a few minutes. Okay. In any event, we're still talking about Ak, it's still after the Tzimtzum, even though it's the first Madrega that's manifested in the Halal, in the Makom Panoi, after the Tzimtzum. Ve'imkein, that being the case, how can you say that it's Atzmus itself? Because even if you're talking about the Atik of Ak, It's still after the tzimtzum. We'll explain shortly. Gam kasha, another question that we have. The Be'idra Amru, that in the Idra it says, Ba'atik Yoimin, it talks about in Atik Yoimin, not in Atik Kadisha, but in Atik Yoimin, Galgalta, Enayim, Moicha, it talks about madregas of the Galgalta, the skull, Enayin. Ayin is the, or Ayanin in Aramaic, which is the eyes, Moicha, the brain, and so on, so to speak, of Atik. Since everything, of Ak rather, since everything, no, I'm right, Atik of Ak, yes, Atik of Ak. So, since it talks about these madregas, in other words, since it talks about the Galgalta, or Gugalta, Enai, and Moicha, how can you have those inyonim in Orein Sof Mamish? She calls them Moira as a spheroids. This sort of indicates the universe of spheroids. Ubatzmus on Mamish and Shaykh Shum Sphira Chulu. Whereas in Atzmus, not Shaykh any Sphira. So how can you say that's Atzmus? Well, if you are now, but according to what we just explained, Yuturats, we can answer this question. These questions are not that difficult according to what we explained before. Why? Because it's not that we talk about Kalim in Atzmus. We're talking about oil. My drag is in the oil. Even in the very root of the Kav. The Hainu Kmoshu Kalul Ba'orein Sof Shelifnei HaTzimtzum. The Kav as it is in the Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Which Madrega of Orein Sof? The lowest Madrega of Orein Sof. The Or HaShayach Lo'olemis. It's not yet Shayach to Oilemis because the Tzimtzum didn't happen yet. But it will be Shayach to Oilemis because it was planned that way. Right? It was planned that there would be Or in Oilemis before the Oilemis actually came into existence. So that those madregas in the Or and Sof before the Tzimtzum, i.e., Ha'or HaShayach Lo'olemis, or that's relevant to the world, over there's the Indian of Eses Sfiros. Gam again, Shegam B'Shorosh Makor HaKav, the Hainu K'moshu Kalul B'Or Ein Sof Shelifnei HaTzimtzum, in the madrega of Or Ein Sof called Or HaShayach Lo'olemis, Shayach Eses Sfiros hagenuzot. It's Shayach to have Eses Sfiros in the Oiros before the Tzimtzum. Okay, let's continue. And we could say that the Kav as it comes out afterwards, in other words, not the Kav as it is in the Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum, but the Kav now as it's Nimshach after the Tzimtzum. Where is it Nimshach from? What Madrega of the Or HaShayach Lo'olemis? HaKav Yesh Loimar Nimshach Rak Mebechinas Malchus Sheba Malchus the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot. It's only the lowest, very lowest madrega of that Orein Sof that's nimshach as the kav. That's the shorish of the kav in malchus of the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot. Now the Rebbe Rashab doesn't mention it here, but there is it's brought in Kisvei Arizal that the kav is nimshach be malchus to Orein Sof. Right? What does it mean, Malchus to Orein Sof? It means Malchus to Malchus of the Eses Sfiros hagenuzot. That madrega of Orein Sof, that's Shaykh to Oilemis. And from there, Nishava Ak. From the Kav, that's where Ak comes from, as we know. We just said that Ak is the first Igulim that happened in the Chalal. Now, in Ak itself, there's two madregas in Ak, in a general sense. There's the Or which comes out as the Igulim. We just explained what the Igulim are. The Igulim, again, are when the Or of the Kav circles around the perimeter of the Chalal, the outer perimeter of the Chalal, and circles around again inside of that, and again inside of that, and again inside of that, until you get the Eses Sfiros of Igulim. You also have at the same time the Eses Sfiros of Yosher. What's Yosher? Yosher is the descent of the spheroids from Keser to Malchus. From Keser to Malchus. Now, the difference between Igulim and Yosher, if you can imagine it like this, that in the Igulim, the biggest of the Igulim inside the Chalal would be the Keser of Igulim. Or if you have problems with the Kesser, because the Kesser might be the Rashis Akav, let's not get into it. But the biggest eagle that would then be, if we're going to discount the very, very first one, because it could be that that's just the very beginning, the very entry of the Kav into the Halal might be called the Kesser. The biggest sphera, so to speak, the biggest circle, the biggest eagle would be Chochmah. The eagle within that would be Bina. The eagle within that would be Chesed, and then Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus. Right? That's how it would go. And it goes sort of, they go kind of consecutively, you could say. Right? They go consecutively. In other words, that one follows the other, and one follows the other, one follows the other. And so the innermost circle, the innermost eagle of the Igulim is Malchus. The outermost will be Chochmah or perhaps Keser. In Yosher, it works the other way around. In Yosher, the biggest, or let's call it the lowest Madrega, obviously in Igulim, the highest Madrega is Chochmah, the one that's closest to the Or Ein Sof, which surrounds the Halal. That would be Chochmah or Keser. And then the next Madrega would be Bina, and then it goes on. And Malchus is the lowest Madrega of the Igulim. Here in Yosher, it actually works the other way around. The lowest Madrega of the Spheros in Yosher is also Malchus, but Malchus, in order to get to the next Madrega in Yosher, so you have to go more pneumistic, right? You have to go into a more pneumistic level. In other words, within Malchus of Yosher is Melubash Yesoid, and within Yesoid is Melubash Hoid, and within Hoid is Melubash Netzach, and so on and so on and so forth. It goes on until you get to Chochmah of Yosher, which is the innermost dimension of the spheres of Yosher, and it's in the innermost recess, so to speak. So you have to go through all the other spheres in order to get to Chochmah. Ayin in Igulim, it starts off with Chochmah and then goes to Malchus. Yeah, it starts with Malchus and goes to Chochmah. Right? Okay. So in any event, that's the difference between Igulim and Yosher. And Igulim and Yosher are called Nefesh and Ruach. Igulim is called Nefesh, and Yosher is called Ruach. In other words, Yosher is a higher Madrega than Igulim. Why? Because the Iker Inyan is not Makifim, Igulim. The Iker Inyan is the Or Pnimi. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nitav HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyaslo dira betachtoinim. He wanted a dira betachtoinim. In other words, he wanted Oris bekalim. Igulim are Oris Makifim, but there's no Kalim per se. Masha Enkain, the Inyan of Yosher, there is an Inyan of Kalim, and therefore Yosher is the Inyan of Ruach as opposed to Nefesh. Nefesh is the beginning. Nefesh is like a Chayos Aguf, Ruach is a Chayos Amidois. So the question is asked in Sifra Kabbalah, if we are going to talk in the Arizal about Bechinas Nefesh and Ruach, what happened to Neshama Chai and Yechida, the higher madrigas of Neshama in the Oilumas? Surely in Adam, in Ak, and in the madrigas that come immediately after the Tzimtzum, you can have all the madrigas, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama Chai, Yechida. What happened to them? The Arizal only speaks about Nefesh and Ruach. So again, why don't we mention those? Now, the simple answer is because they're so lofty that they're completely beyond our grasp, and therefore we don't talk about things that we can't understand. So, Mela, we don't talk about them, but nevertheless, the question is valid. But they have an answer for it, a different answer, not the answer by Pashtus. They have a different answer, and that's as follows. And the answer that they give to this, move on, the Yechida Da'ak, we understand from these answers that there is a concept called Yechida of Ak. What's the Yechida of Ak? The Yechida of Ak is the same as Atik that we mentioned before. Zehu inyan esas hagenuzot, kmo shekludin bo Ein Sof. This is the inyan of the sefirot hagenuzot as they are in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. That would be called Yechida of Ak. In other words, how Ak is meyuchad with the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum at the level of Yechida. V'akav zeu k'mo chaya. So the kav is the madrega of chaya. Why would the kav be the madrega of chaya? Because the chayra after the inyan of the sefirot hagenuzot, which would be Yechida, comes the hamshocha, the gilui of that inyan from malchus, the malchus of the sefirot hagenuzot, which is the kav. So that would be called chaya. He says, oh, it could be called neshama. Maybe there's a different madrega. Maybe we divide the sefirot of the sefirot hagenuzot into two, perhaps the inyan of moichin and the inyan of midas. Anyway, whatever it is, the inyan of the kav is either chaya or it's neshama. It could be neshama as well. If we're going to divide the sefirot into two sections, like the sefirot are always divided into two sections, moichin and midas. So if we divide the sefirot hagenuzot as well into two sections, moichin and midas, then we would say that the highest level is Yechida, that's the sefirot hagenuzot themselves, before the Tzimtzum. And then with the divide into three, that would be Keter, and that would be the Keser of the sefirot hagenuzot, Yechida. And then Chaya would be the Chabad, or perhaps just Chochma of or the Chabad of the sefirot hagenuzot, and the Neshama would be the Midos of the sefirot hagenuzot. Okay. So again, so the kav would be therefore chai or neshama nimshach b'knis yechida lislavish tochak. It's drawn down from yechida from the sefirot hagenuzot before the tzimtzum into ak, to be clothed within ak. Just like the neshama is clothed within a guf, that would be the inyan of the neshama of the sefirot hagenuzot. It's clothed within ak. The Yechida who begins atik. So as we said before, Yechida would be called the atik of the sefirot. So let's just recap. Yechida would be the atik of the sefirot hagenuzot, and that would be the inyan of the atik of Adam Kadmoin. Chaya would be Chochma or Chochma Bina or Chochma Bina Das, and then Neshama would be the 6 midas from Chesed to Tiferes, to Chesed to Yesod rather, and then Malchus would be the Shorish of the Kav of Malchus, and Malchus of the sefirot hagenuzot. The Kav comes out the big Gilui. Okay. V'hainu, meaning to say, sefirot hagenuzot atik da'ak. Therefore, the sefirot hagenuzot altogether are the atik of ak. As we explained, as we just explained, and then there's several madregas in that Atik of Ak, the 10 spheres of the Atik of Ak. Okay. Valpize Yeturats, and according to this, we can also explain the question that we had originally. Mashman bezohar, what's understood in the Zohar, the Atik hu mehusav atzmusoi. That Atik is mehusav atzmusoi. Why? Because the sefirot hagenuzot, which are called Atik and Yechida of Ak, because again, the Yechida of Ak is the sefirot hagenuzot is Kamoshe Gnuzim b'ma'atzilan, Gnuzim in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. So sefirot hagenuzot shein kamo Atik v'Yechida la'ak harem klulim b'Or Ein Sof mamash shalamalim ha'Tzimtzum v'Akav. They're in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, before the Kav, before there's even an inyan of the Tzimtzum. It's not just that higher than the Tzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum happened, before the Tzimtzum and the Kav. Ki HaKav nimshach rak mi Malchus the Ein Sof. He said before mi Malchus to Malchus, but in a general sense, mi Malchus the Ein Sof. Rachei nikra Atik atzmusoi mamash. And therefore you can say that Atik is atzmus. Why? Because it's the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. And the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum is atzmus, even though we're talking about the lowest madrega of the Or Ein Sof. The Or HaShayach Lo'olam is, but nevertheless, it's still Or Ein Sof. And that's why there is still shaykh to speak about madregas of Ayin, Gugalta, and so on and so forth, as I'll explain. Shaykh bo lahazkir inyan Galgalta or Gugalta Ayanin Chulu Hamoyim al Esas Sefirot. It's nevertheless shaykh to talk about in Atik. It's shaykh to talk about these inyanim of Gugalta, Ayin, etc., etc. Called a shaykh b'shorish u'makur because it's all shaykh in the shorish and the makur of the kav, which is again the shorish and the makur of the kav is in malchus of the sefirot hagenuzot. So when the kav is still in malchus before it comes out of there, before it emerges from there, before it comes begilui, it's shaykh to talk about the inyan of sefirot hagenuzot in the kav before the tzimtzum. But in the madrega of Orein Sof, even if it's already bebechinos gilu meha etzem, in other words, it's not the etzem haor, but haor shebegilu le'atzmo, which is gilui, but it's only le'atzmo, it's only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. That's shaykh to talk, that's not shaykh to talk over there about the inyan of sefirot at all. And kol shekain in etzem haor. And obviously, in something that's or Ein Sof, that's the Ein Sof Mamash, obviously it's not even shaykh to even klal discuss the inyan of sefirot. Okay. So Kitzer, Rosh Ha'oros, Hanes Sefirot hagenuzot. So the root of the oiros later on, what'll be the oiros in the kelim. But the oiros are subdivided already. There is an inyan of sefirot in the oiros. The shosha oiros haina esas sefirot hagenuzot ba'orein sof shel shnei hatzimtzum. That's the inyan of the distinctions that we find in the or before the esas sefirot hagenuzot. Distinctions in the or even before the tzimtzum. Shein shorsha hagvul. These are the shorish hagvul. What the gvul of what? The gvul of the or, not the gvul of the kailim. The gvul of the kailim comes from the shimo. The gvul of the or comes from the sefirot hagenuzot. Orein Sof atzmoi hu ora bli gvul, whereas the Orein Sof himself or itself is the inyan of the ora bli gvul. Sefirot hagenuzot zeh b'chinas atik da'ak. The sefirot hagenuzot, as we said before, that's the madrega of kesav ak, the pnimis of kesav ak, atik da'ak. And therefore could be called atzmus. You can still have the inyan of differentiation in the oiros because we're not talking about the or shebegilu la'atzmo, kol shekain etzema or kol shekain ein sof. We're only talking about the or hashayich la'olemus, and therefore it is shaykh to speak there about the inyan of sefirot and the inyan of gugalta, ayanin, moicha, v'chulu. Okay, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take some questions. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any questions, so I guess we'll leave it at that. All right, obviously next Sunday is Rosh Hashanah, so I don't think we'll be having a shir on Rosh Hashanah. Following that, we will probably have a shir. In fact, the next shir we have, I would like to try and cover the next two prokim. I know it's going to be a stretch, but I'd like to cover two prokim because then we're going to have a break for Sukkot in a couple of weeks and this and that. So I would like to finish the Maimah beforehand if it's possible. If we don't, we don't, but I'm going to shoot for it next week. So plan next week that the next class is going to be a little bit longer, probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes longer than usual. All right, folks, we'll leave it at that. Have a wonderful Yom Tov. Ksiva Chasimot Taiva to everybody. Lashana Tov Musuka. Since this year begins on Shabbos, so it's Yom Shekulu Shabbos Menucha L'Chayolomim. Be'ezus Hashem, it will be completely a year of Shabbos.